The hum of the spacecraft tapered off as Captain James Elwood felt the gentle thud of a landing. The doors of the shuttle slid open, and he was immediately struck by the shimmering lights and the exotic architecture of the Star Emperor's palace on Xanthari. It looked like a sprawling city sculpted from glass and living light, reflecting the planet's twin suns in dazzling bursts of color. Beside him, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mark Ridley, whistled low. "Look at that view, Captain. You sure we're here for talks and not a vacation?" James smirked, adjusting his uniform. "Focus, Ridley. We're not here to sightsee. Remember, we're representing Earth. Let's make a good impression." As they stepped onto the radiant blue tiles of the starport, the Xanthari delegation approached, their steps silent and movements fluid. The leader, a tall figure with iridescent skin and eyes like deep pools of ink, bowed deeply. "Welcome, Captain Elwood, Lieutenant Ridley. I am Therex, steward of the Star Emperor. His Excellency awaits your presence at the court. Please, follow me." James nodded, exchanging a glance with Mark. They followed Therex through winding paths bordered by luminous plants and streams that sang like wind chimes. "So, Therex, this place is incredible. Is all of Xanthari this beautiful?" Mark inquired, his tone a mix of genuine curiosity and diplomacy. Therex smiled, a small upturn of the lips that suggested amusement. "Yes, Lieutenant. Our architects harmonize with nature. It is the Xanthari way, balance and beauty. But let us speak more as we walk. Tell me, have you been briefed on the court protocols?" "As much as we could be," James replied. "We understand your customs might be different from what we're briefed on, and we're eager to learn and respect your traditions." "That is wise," Therex said. "The court is sensitive to actions and words. It's not just what is said, but how it is conveyed. Our people value subtlety and intent." The group passed through a massive archway leading into the heart of the palace. Servants and courtiers, dressed in flowing garments that trailed light, paused to regard the newcomers with open curiosity. Therex led them into a grand hall where the walls pulsed softly with a warm light, guiding them towards the throne room. Mark leaned closer to James, whispering, "Ever feel like you're in a dream?" "All the time, since we got here," James murmured back. "Stay sharp, though. The real challenge is ahead." They were ushered into a vast circular room where the Star Emperor awaited. Sitting on a low throne, he was an imposing figure, his features both stern and ageless. "Captain James Elwood and Lieutenant Mark Ridley of Earth," Therex announced. "Presented before His Excellency, Star Emperor Valeris of Xanthari." James stepped forward, bowing in a manner they had been instructed. "Your Excellency, it's an honor to stand in your esteemed presence. We come in peace with a hope to build a bridge between our worlds." Emperor Valeris nodded, his voice resonating deeply. "Rise, Captain Elwood, Lieutenant Ridley. We welcome you and look forward to understanding your kind better. Let us talk as equals and explore what benefits our civilizations might share." As they rose, James felt the weight of many eyes upon him. He knew this mission was about more than mining rights. It was about setting the stage for a relationship between Earth and Xanthari. And every word, every gesture would count towards that future. After the formalities at the court, James and Mark were escorted to the grand dining hall, where the feast of welcome would take place. The room was a vast dome, stars visible through the transparent ceiling, casting an otherworldly glow on the gathered dignitaries. Mark nudged James as they took their seats at a long, low table adorned with exotic fruits and glowing dishes. "This is going to be one interesting meal, huh? Wonder what's on the menu that looks like it's still moving." James chuckled softly, surveying the room. "As long as it doesn't move off the plate, I'm willing to give it a try." Before they could speculate further, Emperor Valeris entered with a stately grace, his 3 daughters following. They took their seats at the head of the table, and with a subtle nod from the Emperor, the feast began. Servers floated between the guests, offering dishes that were both aromatic and mysterious. James tried to show his appreciation by sampling everything, even if his taste buds were occasionally baffled. Beside him, a Xanthari scientist named Darren had noticed his adventurous eating. "You seem to embrace our cuisine with much enthusiasm, Captain Elwood. Is all human food so tame in comparison?" James smiled, swallowing a particularly piquant mouthful. "Some might say it's tame, yes, but I like to think we have our moments of culinary bravery. How do these dishes compare to everyday meals in Xanthari?" Darren laughed, a sound like the tinkling of chimes. "Oh, these are quite ordinary by our standards. On special occasions, however, our chefs really expand the boundaries of what is possible. As the meal progressed, the conversation shifted from food to culture. Mark, ever the conversationalist, engaged the youngest daughter, Morel, and talk about Xanthari's music. So, Morel, your musical instruments are fascinating. That string one over there, it sounds like water. How do you learn to play something like that? Mark asked, pointing to a slender, luminescent harp near the ensemble. Morel's face lit up, her shy demeanor warming to the subject. It's called oscillatory. We learn from a young age. It's part of our education. The music is supposed to emulate the natural sound of Xanthari, to keep us connected to our planet no matter where we are in the universe. That's beautiful, Mark replied sincerely. There's something universal about music, isn't there? It connects us all, no matter where we're from. The conversation was interrupted as Emperor Valeris stood, raising his glass for a toast. To our distinguished guests from Earth, may tonight's feast deepen the bonds between our worlds. Glasses clinked in unison, and the feast continued under a banner of newfound friendships. James took the moment to observe the dynamics at the table, seeing potential allies in the faces around him. After the meal, Therex approached James and Mark. If you would follow me, the Emperor requests your presence in the observatory. He wishes to show you the stars from our perspective. As they walked, the palace seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, and James felt the weight of his mission anew. In the observatory, Emperor Valeris pointed out constellations and planets significant to Xanthari history. You see, Captain, every star has a story, the Emperor said. Much like every guest at our table tonight. We hope that in sharing our stories, we find common stars to guide us. James nodded, profoundly affected. I believe we will, Your Excellency. And I hope to add our story to your sky. The night deepened, stars twinkling their silent approval, as potential alliances began to form under the watchful eyes of the universe. The following morning, Captain James Elwood and Lieutenant Mark Ridley were invited to the palace gardens for what was described as a casual exchange of ideas. The gardens were a vivid tapestry of alien flora, colors blending and separating in a dance of hues under the twin suns. As they walked, Mark nudged James, nodding towards a figure waiting by a silver-leaved tree that shimmered with a light of its own. Looks like the eldest princess is here to meet us. Elora, wasn't it? Yes, that's her, James confirmed, adjusting his uniform out of habit. Let's see what she wants. Elora greeted them with a reserved smile, her hands clasped in front of her. Captain Elwood, Lieutenant Ridley, thank you for joining me. I hope the gardens find favor with your senses. They're stunning, James replied. It's quite a different world from what we're used to. I imagine so, Elora said, turning to walk along a path lined with luminescent stones. I've asked you here because I wish to learn more about your world, Earth, your cultures, and particularly your views on leadership and governance. Mark raised his eyebrows in interest. That's a hefty topic over morning walks, Princess. But we're happy to share what we know. As they strolled, Elora listened intently while James described Earth's political systems, the diversity from democracy to other forms of governance. Mark chimed in with anecdotes of his travels, highlighting the cultural peculiarities that enriched his experiences abroad. Your world sounds immensely complex, Elora noted. So many systems coexisting, sometimes clashing. On Xanthari, our governance has been unchanged for millennia. That stability must be reassuring, James said, but it's the differences that test us and often lead to growth. Elora paused, looking back towards the palace. And what of personal freedoms? On Xanthari, our roles are often predetermined. Is it the same on Earth? Mark laughed softly. Far from it, Princess. On Earth, you can be born into a fisherman's family and end up a leader. Your path is yours to carve, though it's not without its challenges. Freedom with a price, she mused. Fascinating. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another figure, General Korax, a high-ranking military officer in the Xanthari forces. He greeted them with a nod, his gaze lingering on Elora. Princess, your father requested that I find you. He needs your counsel on a matter of trade. Elora nodded, her expression unreadable. Of course, General Korax. But before I leave, Captain Lieutenant, might we continue this conversation at another time? There's much more I wish to learn. Absolutely, Princess, James replied. We are at your disposal during our stay. As Elora and the General departed, Mark looked over at James, his expression thoughtful. She's sharp, that one. Really sharp. Yes, James agreed, watching her retreating figure. And curious. That could mean a lot for how this mission turns out. Her interest in our ways might bridge more than just diplomatic gaps. They continued to explore the gardens, but the morning's conversation lingered in James's mind, sparking a mixture of anticipation and concern about the role they would play in the evolving dynamics of Xanthari society. The Xanthari night was cool, its twin moons casting a serene glow over the palace grounds. James found himself drawn to the garden where he had walked with Elora earlier in the day, hoping to clear his mind and prepare for the upcoming negotiations. As he meandered down the luminescent path, the soft sound of a stringed ciliary broke the silence. The melody was haunting, filled with a complexity that spoke of ancient traditions and hidden sorrows. James followed the sound, discovering Elora seated beside a softly glowing pool, her fingers deftly maneuvering over the instrument strings. "Princess Elora," James greeted, careful to keep his voice low. "I didn't mean to intrude. Your music, it's beautiful." Elora looked up, her expression one of mild surprise that softened into a smile. "Captain Elwood, please join me. I find the night brings a certain clarity to my thoughts." James sat down beside her, watching her fingers dance across the ciliary. "It seems to bring out your talent as well. I didn't realize you played." "It's one of the few freedoms I cherish deeply," she confessed, setting the instrument aside. "Tell me, James, do humans often find solace in music?" "Many of us do," James replied. "Music can be a refuge, a way to express what words sometimes cannot." Their conversation drifted from music to art and then to literature, revealing shared passions and stark differences. As the moons climbed higher, Elora's demeanor shifted, becoming more introspective. "Captain, may I speak freely with you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, Elora. What's on your mind?" "In our earlier talk, you spoke of personal freedom," she began, her gaze fixed on the shimmering water. "I find myself envious of such choices. Here, my path is bound by tradition and expectation." James listened, understanding the weight of her words in this secluded garden. "It's a heavy burden," he acknowledged. "On Earth, we say that to know oneself, you must sometimes walk paths others have not tread." Elora's eyes met his, a flicker of rebellion lighting them. "And if one wishes to walk such a path tonight?" The question hung in the air, charged with implications. James felt the pull of his duty, the protocol of his mission, but also the undeniable connection forming between them. He reached out, his hand brushing hers. "Then we walk together," he said, his decision made. Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of curiosity, of shared solitude, and the thrill of forbidden steps. The night deepened around them, their explorations gentle, a discovery of touches and whispers that mingled with the night's serene songs. As dawn approached, they parted ways at the garden's edge, the world unchanged yet entirely altered for them both. "What happens now?" Elora asked, a note of concern threading her quiet voice. James considered the complexity of their positions, the potential consequences. "I don't know, Elora, but whatever comes, we'll face it. For now, let's hold on to tonight." She nodded, her smile sad but genuine. "Yes, let's keep tonight as ours." As James returned to his quarters, the first light of morning painted the sky in hues of promise and caution. He knew that the night's events could ripple through their negotiations, through the very heart of Xanthari politics. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret the path they had chosen to walk, if only for a few stolen hours. The morning after their clandestine meeting, the palace was abuzz with the usual diplomatic routines, but an undercurrent of tension pulsed through the air. James and Mark met early in the courtyard to discuss the day's agenda, but their conversation quickly turned to more personal matters. Mark noticed James's distracted demeanor. "You're looking a bit out of sorts today. Rough night?" James hesitated, then decided honesty was best with his second-in-command. "Mark, I need to discuss something sensitive." "It's about Princess Elora." Mark's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Okay, shoot." James recounted the previous night's events, careful to keep his voice low. "It was unexpected. But there's a connection there, Mark. Something that goes beyond the diplomatic." Mark nodded slowly, processing the information. "This could complicate things, James. You know how strict they are about their traditions." "I know," James admitted. "And I'm not sure how to navigate this. If word gets out." Before he could finish, the conversation was interrupted by General Corax, who approached with a brisk pace and a stern expression. "Captain Elwood, Lieutenant Ridley, a moment, please. Both men straightened, turning to face the general. General Corax, how can we assist? James asked. There have been rumors, Corax began, his voice low and firm. Rumors involving you, Captain, and one of the Emperor's daughters. Such behavior could endanger the relations between our people. James met the general's gaze, his stance calm but firm. General, I can assure you that my respect for Xanthari customs remains steadfast. My actions are not intended to cause discord. Corax studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. Be mindful, Captain. Our society does not take such matters lightly. I would hate to see missteps undermine our potential alliances. As Corax walked away, Mark whistled softly. That's putting it mildly. We need to tread carefully, James. Agreed, James said. Let's keep this between us for now and focus on the negotiations. We can't afford any distractions. Later that day, during a break in the negotiations, James was pulled aside by Therex, the Emperor's steward. Captain Elwood, may I have a word in private? They stepped into a small, lush garden. Therex's expression was unreadable. I am aware of the situation with Princess Elora, he said without preamble. While some may view this as a transgression, others see it as an opportunity. James was cautious in his response. An opportunity, Therex? Yes, Therex continued. There are those in the court who believe that a union between a human and a member of the royal family could serve as a powerful symbol of integration and mutual respect. James processed this, the political implications spinning in his mind. And the Emperor? What does he think? Therex smiled slightly. The Emperor is a visionary. He may see this as a chance to evolve our traditions, to perhaps open up to new ideas. But, Captain, your intentions must be clear and honorable. They are, James assured him. I care deeply about the implications of my actions. Good, Therex said, because how this plays out will depend greatly on how you and Princess Elora conduct yourselves in the coming days. Be wise, Captain. Much depends on it. As James left the garden, his thoughts were a whirlwind of political maneuvers and personal feelings. He knew he had to balance his heart with his duty, a challenge that might prove his toughest negotiation yet. In the cool, dimly lit chamber of the palace, James stood before Emperor Valeris, a heart beating a steady rhythm of anticipation and apprehension. Mark stood at his side, a silent pillar of support. The Emperor's presence was commanding, and his gaze held the weight of centuries of rule. Captain Elwood, your actions have come to my attention, Emperor Valeris began, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. Your association with my daughter Elora has stirred much discussion in the court. James met the Emperor's eyes, his posture respectful yet firm. Your Excellency, I understand the gravity of the situation. I assure you, my respect for your family and your customs is sincere. The Emperor nodded slowly. Elora speaks highly of you, Captain. She believes your intentions are honorable. However, you must understand that such relationships are not taken lightly here. Mark spoke up, his tone diplomatic. Sir, we recognize the sensitivity here. We're prepared to support whatever steps are necessary to respect and uphold your traditions. The Emperor's gaze shifted between the two men, assessing their sincerity. After a long moment, he spoke again. I find myself at a crossroads. Your planet Earth is known for its dynamic and evolving cultures. Perhaps it is time for Xanthari to consider what changes we too must embrace. James felt a flicker of hope. We are honored by your openness, your excellency. If there is a way to move forward that benefits both our people and respects Xanthari traditions, we are committed to finding it. Emperor Valeris rose from his throne, approaching them. Then let us propose a solution. If you, Captain Elwood, are willing to bind yourself to Elora, to learn our ways and integrate into our society, we might consider it a union of cultures as well as hearts. James exchanged a glance with Mark, who nodded subtly. Turning back to the Emperor, James replied, I am willing, Your Excellency. I believe in the bond that Elora and I share, and I am committed to honoring and understanding your way of life. Very well, the Emperor said, a hint of relief in his voice. This will not be an easy path. Many will question and challenge this decision. Are you prepared to face this scrutiny, Captain? I am, James affirmed, his voice steady, and I will do everything in my power to prove worthy of your trust and her affection. The Emperor extended his hand, a sign of acceptance and agreement. As James took it, the gesture felt monumental, like the joining of two disparate worlds. As they left the Emperor's chamber, Mark clapped James on the back. "Well done, James. That took guts." James smiled wryly. "Thanks, Mark. But the real work starts now." Winning over a court isn't quite the same as navigating a ship through the stars. True, Mark agreed, but I'd say navigating a heart is even trickier than both. The rest of the day was a blur of consultations with advisors and quiet discussions with Elora. They spoke of their future, of the challenges they would face together. Elora was both excited and nervous, her usual composure shaken by the rapid developments. "I never imagined love could lead to such monumental change," Elora confessed as they walked through the palace gardens under the light of the setting suns. James took her hand, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. "Neither did I, Elora. But maybe together we can craft a new path, not just for us, but for our peoples." As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gardens, James felt a sense of purpose ignite. This wasn't just about diplomatic missions or mineral rights anymore. It was about building bridges between hearts, between cultures, between worlds. And that mission felt more profound than any he had undertaken before. The days following the announcement of James's union with Princess Elora were tense. The palace corridors, usually echoing with the harmonious sounds of the Sillery, now thrummed with hushed conversations and speculative whispers. James walked beside Lieutenant Mark Ridley and Darren, a Xanthari cultural attaché assigned to help him understand the intricacies of his future role in the court. "As you can imagine, Captain Elwood, your engagement to Princess Elora is not without its detractors," Darren explained as they traversed the ornate hallway. "Xanthari traditions are ancient, and the integration of an outsider at such a high level is unprecedented." James nodded, his expression serious. "I understand the concerns, Darren. I'm committed to learning and respecting Xanthari ways. I hope to prove my intentions are in the best interest of both our peoples." Mark chimed in, his tone light but supportive. "James has a way of winning people over. Give it some time, they'll come around." They entered a small garden where a few members of the court were gathered. The atmosphere was visibly strained as they approached, but James greeted everyone with the polite assurance he had been practicing since his arrival. One of the senior courtiers, an elder named Zoril, who had always been skeptical, addressed him directly. "Captain Elwood, while some may see this union as a bridge between our worlds, others view it as a dilution of our heritage. How do you respond to such concerns?" James took a moment to formulate his reply, knowing the weight it carried. "I respect and understand the pride you take in your heritage, Elder Zoril. I am not here to dilute or replace your traditions, but to learn and, hopefully, to add to them. Just as I bring my own experiences and culture, I wish to embrace and celebrate yours." Zoril's expression softened slightly, the sharp lines of concern easing. A thoughtful response. "Still, actions will speak louder than words, Captain." As they continued their walk, Darren leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "That went well, all things considered. Zoril is very influential. His acceptance would mean a great deal." The group moved towards the central pavilion, where preparations for the ceremony were being discussed. Engineers and decorators were integrating human symbols with Xanthari motifs, a visual representation of the forthcoming union. James and Mark helped where they could, engaging with the workers, asking questions, and showing a genuine interest in the fusion of styles. This hands-on involvement wasn't unnoticed by the onlookers, some of whom began to approach and engage more openly than before. Later, in a quieter part of the garden, James and Mark debriefed. "It feels like we're walking a tightrope, Mark. One misstep." Mark nodded. "Yeah, but you're handling it like a pro. Just keep showing them who you are, and they'll see the honor in this union." James sighed, gazing at the setting twin suns. "I hope you're right, for Elora's sake and for the future of our relations." As the day faded into evening, the palace buzzed with a cautious optimism. Conversations that had once been hushed now carried a tentative hope. Through genuine interaction and openness, James was slowly weaving himself into the fabric of Xanthari society, each thread pulling tighter to bind two disparate worlds. The day of the ceremony arrived with the sky painted in brilliant hues of orange and purple, the twin suns of Xanthari setting the horizon ablaze as they prepared to unite not just two individuals, but two worlds. The palace grounds were abuzz with activity, both human and Xanthari artisans working side by side to finalize decorations that blended elements of both cultures. James stood in his quarters, adjusting the traditional Xanthari garb that had been specially made for him. The fabric was light and shimmered with the subtle integration of Earth style, a symbolic gesture of the union to come. Mark entered, dressed similarly, his usual grin spreading across his face. "Never thought I'd see you in alien threads, James." "You clean up good," Mark joked, clapping him on the shoulder. James chuckled, smoothing down the fabric. "Feels like I'm stepping into a new skin." "You think they'll accept this old dog learning new tricks?" "They better," Mark replied with a wink. "You're about to become family." The sound of music signaled the beginning of the ceremony. The two men walked out to join the procession, which was making its way toward the central pavilion. As they approached, James could see Elora, radiant in a gown that mirrored his attire, her smile nervous but full of warmth. Darren joined them, his expression proud. "This is a historic day, Captain. Your union will be remembered as a cornerstone of Xanthari-human relations." The pavilion was filled with guests from both worlds, the air thick with anticipation and the fragrance of Xanthari flowers. As James took his place beside Elora, Emperor Valeris rose to address the gathering. "Today, we witness a moment of unprecedented significance," the Emperor began, his voice resonant and clear. "This union is not merely a marriage but a blending of cultures, a bridge between distant stars." James took Elora's hand, feeling the weight of the moment, the eyes of everyone locked on them. Elora squeezed his hand, her touch reassuring. "Do you, James Elwood, accept Elora as your partner, to learn from her, to grow with her, and to respect the traditions that she brings into this union?" The officiant, High Priest of Xanthari, asked in a solemn tone. "I do," James replied, his voice steady. "And do you, Princess Elora, accept James as your partner, to learn from him, to grow with him, and to share the traditions that he brings into this union?" The priest turned to her. "I do," Elora responded, her voice imbued with a hopeful strength. With a traditional Xanthari chant and a human poem read in unison, the ceremony blended the customs of both cultures, creating a new tradition that was greeted with applause and cheers from the crowd. After the ceremony, at the reception, Mark raised his glass in a toast. "To James and Elora, may your stars always align, and may your union illuminate the path for all of us from Earth to Xanthari." The celebrations continued into the night, the pavilion alive with laughter, music, and the sharing of stories between humans and Xanthari. James and Elora danced under the stars, their movements a testament to their new journey together. As the twin suns of Xanthari finally set, casting long shadows over the festivities, James felt a deep contentment. They had faced many challenges and would face more, but together, they had started something powerful, something promising. "We did it," Elora whispered to him as they watched the stars come out. "We did," James agreed, pulling her closer. "And we'll keep doing it together." The night deepened, the stars twinkling their approval, as new bonds formed and old barriers faded into the light of shared understanding and hope.